It seems that the greater good is in ascendancy, with Tau Empire taking home really quite a lot of top spots at tournaments. Let's talk a bit about the strength of the faction and the units that good players are using to bring home these wins. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today we're talking Tau, and in this video I thought we'd take a look at not one but 4 Tau lists that have won big tournaments in the last few weeks. The faction really seems to be going from strength to strength after the balanced data slate, and now really a force to be reckoned with on the table. Prior to 40k's big shake-up a few weeks back, Tau were pretty much one of the bottom of the pile armies, generally considered to be one of the worst armies in the game overall. Their win rate was really quite poor at 38%, though a few good players were still managing to make them work at tournaments, but given that the faction was really struggling pretty hard overall, it's not too surprising that Games Workshop gave them some rather big points cuts, and now they really do feel like a faction to fear, with perhaps a spectacular amount of damage output. For the most part, Games Workshop gave Tau units sweeping points cuts, often around the 15 to 20% sort of mark. I feel like they have done fairly well in making the vast majority of the army playable. Pretty much most of the codex is arguably really quite strong right now. Some things maybe get played a little bit more than others, though most things can get a look in the right list. The overall feel of the army is that they're often a force that might want to go out to try and table the opponent if possible. Lots of very efficient damage dealers that maybe aren't all that tough, and while they go out to do that enormous damage and inflict some grave losses on the opponent's army, they can back that up with a lot of annoying lone operatives and some utility units to make sure that they're racking up maximal points while doing so. For common staples and Tau lists at the moment, a lot of armies are building around Cold Star commanders with cyclic ion blaster crisis suits. Often a big block of 6 of them with Exemplar of Cao Yon is one of the most auto-include type units. And for the most honed lists, people are often using to take Tetras as marker light support for them, giving them massive hit rerolls is pretty powerful. Otherwise, as mentioned, they can have some pretty nice lone operative goodness with Shadowsun, Ornvar or Ghost Kills. They've got some strong choices for scary anti-tank threats, things like Skyrays, Broadsides and Hammerheads. Riptides are pretty playable as a mainline unit at 180 points with a bit more durability than most, and Stealth Suit, Vespids and Kroot units can help take secondary points and screen the army. It is quite cool to see some people actually using the Tau infantry again, maybe in Devilfish. The Strikes and the Breachers were kind of rarely played before. In any case, let's take a look at the units used by people who have won some events with the Tau, 4 strong lists that won big tournaments and beat all comers. First up, and perhaps one of the most interesting and unusual out of the 4, is this list by Logan Antonation, who used it to take first at the Goonhammer Open in Canada, going 6-0 in an event with 40 players. I think that this one's really quite fun just for the sheer amount of Tau armour on the board. Plenty of Fish of Fury here with Devilfish, Hammerheads and Piranhas and Tetras, backed up by a few bigger Battlesuits. The list is headed up by Shadowsun, who's just all around efficient at a new and very cheap 100 points, hit rerolls for units nearby, some good anti-tank shots, a bit of command point regeneration, and able to be an annoying lone operative threat, lots to like there. I'm not sure if she's out doing lone operative things by herself, or buffing the Riptides or Hammerheads maybe. She could give them all reroll ones to hit with her aura. For the main damage dealers of the list, there's a squadron of Hammerheads, Long Strikes heading up another 2 of them, all with railguns for the enormous damage d6 plus 6 shots, Seeker missiles and Smart missiles for a little bit of ignores line of sight there, and they're backed up by some slightly sturdier Riptides with their 4+ invulnerable saves. They're packing ion accelerators and plasma rifles plus their missile drones. Then there's a lot of fast movers and transports moving into the midfield. There's 2 of the new and very cheap Devilfish with gun drones and Seeker missiles moving up. I think they're very good for what they do for the 75 odd points that you pay now, and they're both transporting a squad of breachers, and each of them appear to have a Cadra Fireblade attached with some gun drones, some really powerful close range shooting there between his buffs and their raw special rules. Quite cool that those units are so much cheaper than they used to be. Alongside them, there's a veritable shoal of Piranhas, 2 individual ones with fusion blasters and their Seeker missiles, another 2 in a squadron with fusion blaster and Seekers. Between the lot of them, they could pack a pretty powerful anti-tank alpha strike there. That's 8 shots with the missiles at strength 14. There's a lone operative Ghost Kill with the cyclic ion raker and fusion blasters, not as much damage but just really quite powerful to have a unit that you can't shoot but can still shoot you. 1 squad of Tetras for some big marker support with the reroll hit rolls for some of the heavy damage dealers, maybe the Riptides might be good receivers of that, and a few units that look like they'd be particularly good for secondary objectives, 2 units of 5 Vespid Stingwings which can deep strike and move quite quickly, and then 2 units of 3 Stealth Suits which can infiltrate up the board. Each of them takes a fusion blaster and a marker and shield drone. Overall, looks like a fun list, and kind of interesting to see a Tau list that isn't actually building around cyclic ion blaster spam crisis suits. That does tend to be the way for most of them these days. This does look like a massively threatening army to fight with any sort of more armoured list though. The sheer amount of secret missiles that you get hit with on the first turn that you're exposed is going to be massive, never mind those 3 scary railguns there. Talking of which, it does seem that the Tau Hammerhead's very much alive and well. The railguns are heavy weapons, so can be hitting on a 3+ or maybe a 2 with guided, and that one strikes at a massive strength 20, AP 5 and damage d6+6, devastating wounds if you get lucky and roll a 6. That enormous shot is going to convert quite regularly, seeing as it gets to reroll 1 hit roll or 1 wound roll, which could definitely save you from 1 bad result. And if you've already used it on the hit roll, then a CP reroll to wound if you ever need it could be a very valuable one if you need to spend 1 there. Beyond that, it gets 2 of those Seeker missiles for the Alpha Strike. Really cool to see so many of them in that army, given their strength 14, AP 3 and damage d6+1. Definitely a massive threat in their own right. Long Strike can give them some lethal hits and shadow some reroll 1s potentially. Definitely going to be bad news for any heavy armour on the other side of the table. I feel like their most direct competitor is probably Skyrays, which I feel like offer a very similar sort of damage package. I feel like the two are kind of balanced to the extent where it isn't the most meaningful thing in the world, though I must admit Skyrays do feel quite nice with their lots of shots with the Seeker missiles each turn. Moving on to our next successful Tau list example, and this one's by Colin McDade, who used it to take first at Warzone Houston, again going 6 wins and no losses against a big tournament of 125 players. A pretty impressive result there. This one's a Tau list of a very different flavour to the first one, going very heavy on the Battlesuits and particularly the Crisis suits, though there are a few overlap units. The big damage punch of the list comes from 2 enormous units of Crisis Battlesuits, each with 3 cyclic ion blasters, shield generators and shield drones. As we'll have talked about in a video earlier in the week, these can just put out some ridiculous numbers and kill the vast majority of things in the game if you support them with maximal buffs. It's kind of interesting that in the army there's 2 Cold Star Battlesuits plus Farsight, so it looks like there's more commanders than there are Crisis Suit units here. My guess would probably be that the commanders in the Cold Stars would go with the Crisis Suits, though I'm not 100% sure of that. And then perhaps Farsight will be run solo. He is quite a powerful threat just in his own right, and he might want to charge things more than other Tau units would, and not have to get your entire Battlesuit unit into combat. The Cold Star commanders allow you very fast movement, and one takes the exemplar of Cao Yon, allowing you to get Cao Yon early for all of those double exploding 6s, and there's 2 units of Tetras here. Looks like there should be enough to guide each unit maximally if needed. Otherwise, there's a big unit of broadsides filling in for the tanks for heavy anti-tank duty. They take heavy rail rifles, seeker missiles, and plasma rifles plus shield drones. Quite cool and going all in for maximal shooting power there rather than any support systems. And Shadow Sun somewhere jumping around as well, either providing rerolls to the units or doing lone operative things with some anti-tank shots. Then for scoring some objectives and screening and things, there's 4 Crute Hounds, 2 units of 2 stealth suits with their homing beacons, means that you could potentially have an early rapid ingress with one of the units if it made sense, a Ghost Kill Battlesuit for the safe lone operative stuff with a bit of fire support, then 2 Piranhas and the 2 units of 2 Tetras. Again, absolutely terrifying stuff on the damage output there. Those 2 Crisis Suit units will kill most things in Warhammer 40k. If the opponent's not able to screen things out or hide, then you're going to be in big trouble, and that's easier said than done against Cold Star commanders. Here's the profile for the Crisis Suits, which are very much a mainstay in the majority of Tau army lists these days. Typically going to be running with 2 shield drones, so effectively 6 wounds at toughness 5, usually with a 4+ invulnerable save from the shield generator. The way that these guys usually get run is with maximal cyclic ion blasters. Massive spam of strength 8, AP2 and damage 2 shots with the hazardous keyword might mean that you lose an odd Crisis Suit or 2. But if the unit has Cao Yon activated and they get guided by Tetras, there's very little in 40k that will stand up to a round of shooting from these. They can average a dead Imperial Knight in a turn, or kill pretty much an entire block of Necron Lich Guard, no questions asked. Typically heading them up tend to be Cold Star commanders for 110 points, often with the exemplar of Cao Yon enhancement for a further 15. These guys can bring another 3 or 4 extra cyclic ion blasters to the fight, which is never a bad thing, but their main boost is to make the unit ridiculously mobile. It gives them a 12-inch movement and makes the cyclic ion blasters all go to the assault keyword, and Crisis Suit automatically advance 6 natively anyway. Means that you can move the unit a flat 18 inches and still fire to maximal effect, which is pretty terrifying really. And they often tend to take the exemplar of Cao Yon Warlord trait for an extra 15 points. That's the one that allows you to get it all the way from turn 2, so have the enormous damage punch just that little bit earlier in the game. After they've done their big strike, you can always use the 2CP jump shoot jump stratagem as well to retreat them back to safety somewhere. For the third big winning Tau list, this one was run by a Roger Boyrer who used it to take first at the Iberian Open, going 5-0 against 40 players. Definitely a fair few similar themes to the first one, but doing things a bit differently once more. This one has the same number of Crisis Battlesuits with the Cyclic Ion Blasters, but this time they're split into just one squad of 6 that looks like they're going to be led by that Cold Star Commander with Exemplar of Cao Yon, and then 2 smaller units of 3 of them, maybe a bit better suited to engaging multiple targets as opposed to just trying to do one enormous damage punch on one important thing. There's a very similar unit of 3 broadsides once more, again all taking heavy rail rifles, and the only difference between the last lot is that they're swapping the shield drones for missile drones, so get a few more slightly low accuracy strength 7 shots in place of a few extra wounds. Beyond that, there seems to be the fairly mandatory ghost kill once more with Ion Raker and Fusion Blaster, a single Riptide for a little bit more tankiness for the army, again with Ion Accelerator and Plasma Rifles, and then a fair bit of objective scoring goodness, 5 Stingwings, 2 individual Piranhas, and Ornvar being just an unusually tanky lone operative that's going to be more trouble for the opponent to kill than he's really worth. There's also a lone ethereal here on a hover drone. He looks like he's literally just here mainly as a command point battery. Each turn he can farm a command point on a 4+. I suppose he's not going to be really doing a whole load else just on his own. He could guide a unit and he does have a marker drone by him. I suppose just having another little nuisance unit on the board isn't the worst though, and it could be helpful for either screening or holding a home field objective on the very cheap. Finally, looks like this list is going to be re-rolling hit rolls the vast majority of the time, as it seems there's not just 1 but 3 units of 2 Tetras here. Some pretty maximal marker support all in all. I feel like Games Workshop might have slightly underestimated just how good Tetras were when they wrote the Forge World datasheets. It seems to be their main motivation to try and keep most of the Forge World units as kind of alright, but rarely the best thing in the army. Currently though, they're just an absolutely god tier guiding unit, really quite cheap at 80 points, actually surprisingly tough for the cost given that there's 14 wounds between the two of them at toughness 7. And even if they don't have anything to guide for a turn, they're really quite nice just for screening nuisance units. They're not going to do any damage, but they've got a big 14-inch move and could even forward deploy a little bit if it would make sense for some reason. The main reason that people take them though is their high intensity marker lights. When they guide one of your units, you get to just fully re-roll the hit roll in addition to the normal +1 to hit and the ignores cover as they have the marker light keyword. It's just a ridiculous force multiplier for one of those big crisis blocks with the cyclic ion blasters, or just about anything else to be honest. Compared with guiding the unit from just another unit in your army, that's usually going to be an extra 33% damage output for the investment of 80 points. Perhaps kind of a shame they're Forge World really, and paying a bit of a premium over Games Workshop costs. Plus I feel like getting into Forge World 40k models might not be the best idea in the long run, given that Games Workshop does have a track record of removing them quite regularly. At the moment though, for competitive Tau lists, they seem basically auto-include for the massive extra damage they can bring. Finally for the 4th list, this was run by Thomas Ogden, who used it to take first at Showdown at Frogtown, going 5-0 against 26 players. This one seems to be pretty much just a straight out maximal damage list, aiming to table the opponent as fast as possible. All the rest of them here today do seem to have at least some nods to screening and secondary scoring, but there's not really any of that here. Again, this list is building around 2 of those enormous blocks of Crisis Battlesuits with the Cyclic Ion Blasters, one led by the Cold Star Commander, who takes the painful decision to drop one of the Cyclic Ion Blasters for a shield generator, and seemingly the other one led by Farsight. Then for anti-tank duties, there's 2 individual broadsides with rail rifle, plasma rifle, and the support system to ignore some modifiers, and 3 Scary Skyray missile defense gunships with all their strength 14 Seeker Rack missiles. Between the broadsides and the Skyrays, you're going to put an awful lot of damage on anything that's a big hard target with high toughness, and the Crisis Battlesuits should absolutely ruin just about anything else. Otherwise, there's a couple of near mandatory Tetras here. Commander Shadowsun, who could do rerolls, or Lone Operative jumping around and scoring things. I guess she might be quite nice with the Skyrays to support them maybe, if you just wanted more damage. And interestingly, there's 2 Sunshark Bombers, kind of a rare sight in Tau lists. I understand that these guys might have been taken in error due to not quite knowing how the bombs worked in the list. At least that's what I saw down mentioned in comments, both on Reddit and on the last video that I mentioned this list in. Obviously doesn't really seem to have had too much impact on the success of the list though, given that he still won. I suppose they're still going to pack a pretty powerful beta strike with all of those ion turrets as well, which won't hurt. The firepower in this one is pretty maximal, and I guess flyers could be extra useful in just hunting down things that you couldn't see directly with some of the other units. In any case, seems to be a rather good time if you're a greyskin battlesuit pilot. Let me know what you make of the list, or if you have any other insights as to how they worked down in the comments below. They definitely seem pretty massively intimidating to play against though, just with the sheer damage output that they can bring to the table. If you've enjoyed the video, then feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics. I'll certainly keep the regular 40k videos coming. I'm sure I'll have more for the Tau in the future. I do tend to post 40k things most days though. Finally, if you have been enjoying all the videos on the channel and you'd like to help support, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page as well, and you can find that linked in the video description if you'd like to help support. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things come next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.